Hey crafty friends, this is Jenny from crafttestdummies.com, and today we're going to talk about Gansai Tambi Watercolors by Kuretake Zig. That's a mouthful, but you're going to want to take a look at these premium watercolor paints from Japan. They're really cool. Let me show you. So let's take a look at these interesting watercolors from Japan. I bought this set online, and as you can see, they're beautiful, rich, bright colors. I don't have any lighting in the studio today other than the natural light. And one thing I did notice is that each one is an individual pan and individually wrapped. So here's how it looks. So here's how they look. You can see that actually in this one, I used this one. It has some little bubbles in it. This is a yellow I haven't used, and you can see some cracking, which I'm not really sure why it does that. But you'll find that they are individually wrapped like this. So before you get going, you're gonna have to discard of all of these little pieces of plastic. Now there is the Japanese characters on the back and the number. So if you forget where it is, you can line it back up. You can line it back up with your template, because you can see here's the number, and then this one is number 57, so it goes right in that little spot. So let's see how they look on paper. Okay, so I'm sure that some of you are going to want to see how to activate them and how they look when you start to use them. So I've just brought a couple of manila tags out, and I'm just using a little mister full of water here to make the paint juicy. This is a true watercolor. I would almost put it in the gouache category, and if you don't know what gouache is, it's just watercolor paint that's very opaque. And this, this paint has so much pigment in it that it is opaque on some surfaces. So let me make one tag wet to the touch and the other one dry, so you can see how the paint goes on. So this almost looks like an acrylic paint. It's so thick and dark, which is great, right? Let me load up my brush again. And here we are on the wet tag. And you can see how it just starts to move around and get lighter. So this gives you lots of opportunities to customize your color and your look, because there's so much paint, so much pigment in the paints themselves. And so next I'd like to show you some samples of things that I've tried out. So first let's go through some swatches, and now these are all dry, and you'll see that a lot of the pages are very curly because this is a watercolor medium and there was a lot of water, and this is just regular about 80-pound cardstock. But I went ahead and did a swatch test for you so you could see. This is really interesting to me. There's almost a shiny area where there was a lot of pigment, which I guess I'm not used to with watercolors. Look on the black. Look how the black almost looks shiny like an acrylic paint would. And so what I did is I did my swatches and then I sprayed it with water so you could see how the reactivity was, and how kind of bled out and got that interesting watercolor look. Now this is a good swatch for you to take a look at, because you can see here on this pattern paper how opaque the Gansai Tambi watercolor paints really are. With the black, it completely obscures it. It almost looks, again, like a water or an acrylic instead of a watercolor. And you're gonna get, really good coverage over a pattern paper. A little bit will come through, so it is a little bit translucent, but there's a lot of pigment there. And again, you can see that little bit of shine. Just for fun, I wanted to try some vellum. And while it did, yes, kind of wrinkle the vellum, it still is a very pretty effect and very, very bold. Here I actually used watercolor paper. I wanted you to get that effect too. It still is a little curly, so just the tip, if you've never used it, get some medical surgical tape. It's usually pretty cheap and it's waterproof, and you can tape this down on 4 sides and it'll help hold the paper flat, and then as it dries it will keep it from being quite so wrinkly. You can see I didn't do that with this, and then you end up with wrinkly paper. I could always put a book on this to flatten it back out, but if you tape it down to your table, it works really, really well. Oh, one thing I did want to try out live on camera, and I want to see, this has been dried for a while. If I add water to it, will it reactivate? And the answer is yep. You can see right there. So it remains water reactive once it's dry. It's still watercolor. Ooh, and you can still work with it and play with it even afterwards, which I kind of like. Woo. Okay, stop playing, Jenny. Get on with it. Okay, so the next sample will be black paper. And this is usually where traditional watercolors kind of fail us. They don't show up that well on black or dark substrates, but you can see the Tanzigambis give us a little bit of shine, like an acrylic would, and definitely show up very well. This is the white paint, and I think the white paint actually looks really cool. It has kind of a chalky look, which is really popular right now, so this is something I want to experiment with more. Lastly, I have a tag I did, and I'm going to get closer. So I stamped this first with a Hero Arts ink, and then I watercolored on top of it, and again you see that little bit of shine that you get. You can still see the lines of the stamping, but because this has a lot of pigment, it does obscure it a little bit. So if you like a really light look, you're going to have to dilute this quite a bit. And for a lot of my samples, I worked right out of the palette, so I picked up just the color from the palette on the brush. So you can thin this out, and I would definitely suggest that if you want to do watercoloring with stamping, make sure you mix it into a bottle cap or a palette so that you can get a nice light color so you can see your stamping lines. And in this last segment, I'm just going to share a few of my playtime explorations with you. So here I used some watercolor paper, and I did a wash over top, and then I did some spatter techniques and just let things kind of blend and move around. I specifically wanted to see how the yellow would hold up, and it did. It stayed nice and bright, and it only muddied a little bit when it mixed with the green, but it's kind of pretty. I'll be cutting this up and making a card out of this. Next, I wanted to do some watercoloring over jelly printing. So the red is the jelly print, and then I watercolored over the top of it. And I really like the way it layers the colors. And of course, because I jelly printed with acrylic, it's not moving, and you can add the watercolors over top and kind of play with it. So I think it's actually really pretty, be lovely for an art journal or some mixed media art. Okay, and these last two samples, I did a technique that I really enjoy. I have another video which I'll share with you, but this is using a stencil as a rubbing. So I used actually crayon to create the stencil texture, and then I watercolored over top using the Tanzigambis. And I really love the vibrant color. You get that little bit of pattern, see, especially this area. I love that. You get some of the pretty pattern from the stencil rubbing, but then the color from the Gansai Tambis really takes center stage. And this was more diluted, of course. This was more straight out of the pan. Oh, and then one last little thing. I just had some black on my paintbrush, and I just painted this tag just really super quickly. Again, there's that little bit of a shine, which is unexpected to me, and it almost looks like an acrylic paint. It's just a beautiful, beautiful black, vibrant color. And if you're not going to layer any other water or media on top of it, this is just so, so pretty. Isn't it lovely? So after playing with these paints all day, my takeaway is that A, they are very creamy and very opaque and very highly pigmented. As a matter of fact, it's easy to be a little heavy-handed with them. Use more water than you think, and make sure you take the paint out of the palette and mix it up in a separate area so that you get a nice light wash and you don't end up with kind of that shiny, maybe even cakey look. I think they're really cool and really fun, and I happen to know that they are really hard to make. The lady from Kuretake told me that it takes 3 days to make one pan. So for each color, it takes 3 days from start to finish, and the whole factory can only make 3 colors at a time. So if they're on back order, now you know why. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this video helpful and or informative. And if you did, please give it a thumbs up because that really helps us out. Of course, we would love it if you subscribed to our channel by clicking this little box right here. And we always love your comments, suggestions, and thoughts. Thank you so much for watching and have a crafty day.